right, welcome everyone to the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast. This week we have MLS legend Kevin Hartman, quite possibly the best goalkeeper in MLS history. I'm just touting his, giving some his props now. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. So great to have you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Thanks for having me. Certainly nice to get on and talk, and whether it's about playing in the past or the things I'm doing now, I always enjoy a conversation about the game. Super passionate about. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome, Kevin. This is David Harris. Thank you very much for coming on. Really looking forward to it. Watched you from the very beginning of the Galaxy days. So real pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, time of my life.
So just to start real quick, I was curious just to know, I saw your current role is with the LA Galaxy Academy Director. Maybe just talk a little bit about your, when we were just talking briefly about your end of your playing career. So take us from your end of your playing career to present day, if you could.
Yeah, so in 2013, I had gone to Red Bull. Andy Roxburgh had asked me to come and, support the goalkeeping crew there and kind of mentor, Luis and Ryan were there at that point. And so it gave me the opportunity to kind of, I was really fortunate to have an additional year to kind of, wean myself off of playing, super passionate about it, but when I got there, I'm not sure that, I'm not sure Mike really, Petke had really approved the decision or for whatever, but it wasn't something like I was ever going to get time. I thought Luis, once I got there, did a really good job and kind of solidified things. And Ryan Miro, I thought it was just a great group to work with. So as I finished up there, I was doing some things in the goalkeeping space. Had the opportunity to meet Hans Leitard, who's the goalkeeper director for Red Bull. And so I transitioned from that, went back to Dallas where my family was at that point. I was doing that and I was pretty content. And about 6 months into that situation, I had the opportunity to go down to IMG Academy. And when they presented me with the opportunity to come down to work with the goalkeepers, but I was already kind of doing something entrepreneurial and was, I think, pretty far down the path of doing what I wanted to do with goalkeepers in terms of being able to assist with their development. I didn't really want to make decisions on which goalkeeper was going to play or have my, necessarily have my career trajectory dictated on one goalkeeper's performance on the weekend. I'd kind of already done that as I was playing. So I wasn't really for the stress of moving around and chasing a professional coaching career at that point. So they came back to me and they said, well, would you be interested in being a technical director? And so for me, I like the idea of managing coaches. I like the idea of being more influential. I think there's a lot of people that are involved in soccer that get out, for something maybe a little bit more lucrative than the coaching opportunities that are currently available within U.S. soccer. So we lose a lot of expertise. And so I was adamant that I was going to, stay within the game and try to share the experiences that I developed while we were pioneering the league. And so I went down there, I obviously didn't have enough expertise probably to be a huge asset to the other coaches that were within the program. But I think that has evolved. Conversations have grown, and I had the opportunity to come back here, start the LA Galaxy Girls Academy. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of build things from the ground up, work on curricular development, hire people, and work at a club where, I feel like, I spent a decade of my career, as a player, and it felt like home. So I was here for probably a year and a half, 2 years, had the opportunity to kind of oversee both programs, the girls and the boys academy. And now as, the development academy shut down the DA, we moved away from the girls side at current time. And so I'm just overseeing the boys now.
Did you have a point in your career where you knew you were going to go into coaching once you retired, or did that come late? I was pretty whole hog into, playing, and so, but also personal development. So I wasn't necessarily sure what I was going to do post playing, but I was always kind of preparing myself for, a litany of things, whether it was, public speaking, whether it was investing, whether it was, different entrepreneurial things. So I really feel like I found like a good spot for myself. So I'm the academy director, but I mostly oversee kind of the soccer operations. So I think having played at LA, having played at Kansas City and Dallas and New York, I had a pretty good idea what the standard needed to look like in a professional environment. And so it's pretty easy for me to go into a situation and really say, hey, this organizational structure is not really functioning the way that it needs to. We're asking too much of our coaches. We're not asking enough of our coaches. And so to have a good balance between, what's a realistic expectation, and then at what point does the professional product that we're looking to provide to our players, at what point does that go down because we're trying to, just cut costs to a point where it becomes negligent. So, I continue to learn. I'm constantly trying to evolve as a director and as a person. And so I think, even up to the last moment, when I went back to UCLA because I had 2 classes I had to take on campus here in Westwood, and I've got a history degree, and I was like, I don't know what I'm ever possibly going to do with this thing. But I think it was more like an ode to the fact that now I have kids, and I want to let them know that those things are important in completing that pathway. So when I was at UCLA, obviously, I didn't know that I wanted to get into the business side of things, or I certainly would have chosen some other classes, I think.
What, if you don't mind, if we go back to the IMG, I was just curious about one thing you mentioned where you didn't think that the coaches needed, like get a lot from your expertise. I was just a little bit curious to hear a little more.
Yeah, I mean, they probably all knew more about the local leagues than I did. I was moving to Florida from Dallas, so a lot of the information about the leagues, current structures, it took me a bit of time to probably learn all that, so that that we could get the the best out of everyone. I would also say that probably the academy down at IMG is pretty complicated. I mean, it's a private school. We also had U.S. national teams, U17 groups were on campus. We hosted a lot of tournaments. We hosted preseason for professional teams. So it was pretty dynamic, and I always considered it to kind of be boot camp for everything that I wanted to kind of accomplish within the business side of the sport. But it was also great because like Jaquiris was down there, Hackworth was down there. So there were some, coaching people that I really had a lot of respect for. So it gave me the opportunity to kind of, go check out what they were looking at, what they were doing, and, just saw some top players that would come through. We had the ability to scholarship a certain number of players. So there was a scouting component of it. It was fast and furious, but I enjoyed it. I lived on Anna Maria Island, which is beautiful, so I think if it wouldn't have been for that trip across the bridge every night going back to see my girls, then I would have, I probably wouldn't have been able to last as long as I did, because it was just really, to the wall, in terms of like trying to make sure that we had the boys taken care of in the morning, the girls taken care of in the afternoon. And then we started kind of a locals U13 group, worked with Braden River. So I was there, 12 hours pretty consistently, 6-7 days a week.
What, if you don't mind, Jake, just add one more, what has filled, like, has anything filled the passion that you had as a player? Like, has anything filled that, or no?
I don't know. I mean, I think to be honest, I don't think anything has done it yet. I mean, I think I've found something and I mean, that's almost embarrassing to say, because I think I'm really lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I'm really lucky to be working in an MLS environment. I work with the director of methodology, Juan Carlos Ortega, who was, the head down at Chivas, and then, with the Mexican Federation for a really long time. So I had the opportunity to learn every day from somebody that, and not just him. I mean, the people I'm surrounded with are just great people. So, but God, I love playing, man. Like I know I can't go back. I know I couldn't ever really do it again. And I really always feel like I'm super fortunate that, I got to play 17 years. I got to win championships. I got to play for the U.S. And so I don't really have a lot of regrets, but man, I mean, I love playing. Like, ask the people to watch me, I mean, I was passionate about it. And I tell the kids, I mean, like, man, there's going to be a lot of things that some challenges, obstacles, hurdles that you're going to face. And if you don't love it, you'll walk away from the game. We talk about, like, people quitting soccer when they're 14 years old now, like, pretty consistently. And I mean, you got I mean, I think as youth coaches, one of our obligations is to make sure the kids are enjoying themselves and being passionate about it. And so I, I think I have a real affinity for the players that you can tell just love it, and it's not like a chore. I always tell parents, we want volunteers, not prisoners. We don't want hostages. If you want to be here, there's a lot of kids that would love the opportunity, and so a lot of it comes down to, creating that passion, kids having that passion. They're still out there. But I just remember like living in Southwestern Virginia and hitting a ball off of a wall for probably, 3 years straight, and not having the kids and the tactical opportunities to really kind of learn the game at the next level. And I think everything kind of came together when I moved out to California.
Yeah, but I watched you a lot during your career. I know it was pretty obvious you had the passion for the game. You said that at one point. If you were like, I watched you a lot, so it was very evident. That's one of the things I think I admire about you the most as a player, and I think fans in general probably they can see very clearly that you're very passionate about the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had a high level of expectation for myself and also expected it from my teammates, but I think as a leader, sometimes it's difficult when you're not having success to lead, because if you don't maybe have that confidence, it's difficult to tell somebody else that, they need to do this or do that. And so, I mean, I think it fluctuated throughout my career, but, I mean, I love having conversations with fans mid-game. I loved, different things that would engage me and make it enjoyable. But, I guess one of my biggest regrets is that, when you're playing, it's like you win on a Saturday or you lose on a Saturday, and you're just getting back to work, and so before you know it, it's kind of over. You've gone through 17 years of playing, and you haven't necessarily taken each moment to really enjoy just how lucky you are within it, and so I still think I need to pull out a calendar sometime and just go through like what was happening at different points of my life, and and really reflect a little bit more on it. But yeah, certainly cool to be a part of the league at that point, to have been able to make the transition to maybe MLS too.
Right.
If you want, Kevin, you can just go on YouTube. There's plenty of clips. I was just recently kind of looking them up. There's plenty of clips of your playing career. You can kind of go through it and reminisce. But just going back to the coaching point that you were making about kids kind of quitting the game at 14, is there anything you would change with the youth players in terms of, you hear a lot that maybe in the US we're too competitive, or we're too focused on winning before the age of, say, 15, 16. Is there anything you would change, or do you just think it comes down to picking the right players who are passionate about the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because, I think we're scared of competition from some perspectives. I mean, I think, how we hand out trophies. I mean, I think there's a lot of good things that come out of this. You talk to top performers, and they're not guys that, quit easily, and part of that is being able to overcome adversity. And I think sometimes, as a parent, like, I think I have to take a step back sometimes, because when I see my daughter facing adversity, the last thing you want to do is like see her struggle, or or end up crying or something. But the reality is, I mean, that's how you grow. I mean, there's no growth without struggle, and there's no hunger in paradise. And so you're trying to figure out these different ways to get people to evolve, and so, when everything's always been easy, as soon as people hit like that hurdle that we talked about, and they're not able to kind of, get over it, it's tough to see long-term success in that situation. And I always felt like, we crashed out of the World Cup last time, and it was a group that had more opportunity probably than at any stage within US soccer. And so, I mean, you can talk about where we are right now, and like how the support of the US player has changed to a point that, you have guys like Pulisic and Reina over in Germany and in England and throughout Europe. But, they're finding a struggle, and they're finding like that they're playing against top level. But I felt like there was a time there where, like, if you didn't make it in the USL, you could just go to another USL team. If you didn't make it there, like, there was another USL team you could find. MLS teams would kind of push players from one thing to another, and before you know it, you have like a 12-year career, and you've never really had success. And you look at guys like myself and Kobe and some of the other Galaxy guys. I mean, it's like there's only 10 teams and there was only 20 players. And so like, if you wanted to play professional soccer within the United States, like there's only 200 spots, and like, and that lack of opportunity and the competitiveness that it took to be in that, I think it's probably dismissed a little bit too easily by the current, the current fan that doesn't understand like how difficult it was. And I mean, you had some people that were pretty hardened professionals, within MLS one that probably could have found success, even today.
Do you think, kind of playing off that question, do you think that we've expanded too quickly in American soccer at the professional game?
I mean, I think that expertise in the game is still still evolving. I think that you have to find some way to to create jobs that and ways to pay people that genuinely have soccer expertise. I think that the fan is getting smarter. I think access to top level soccer is there. I think we're in the process of determining that we can become a feeder league, that we can sell players, that we can be a part of this international marketplace. But to do that, you really have to kind of, it's difficult to say that, hey, we're gonna sell these players for millions and millions of dollars, and not have player passports, not have quantitative data that you can show these clubs. Like, so I think all of that stuff is really kind of evolving. But I'm optimistic. I think MLS coming in and taking over the youth side of the game I think they're having more conversations. I think that there's more, the stakeholders are included in the conversations, because I think sometimes with the DA it was weird, like having the federation running like a league that competed with with all the other leagues within the United States. But yeah, I'm hopeful, and I think that we not only need to find ways to support the players, we need to find ways to support our coaches. And so whether that is some type of a mentorship, whether it's some type of a program where it's set up similar to like a union, where you come in and you can kind of work through these different processes and watch real soccer experts evolve in this country. Because in the past, I think in England, and I think it's one of the reasons you see so many very good English coaches that have made their way over to the United States, is like it was a legitimate, viable option to make a living as a soccer coach. And that's only really something that's been the case in the United States for probably 10 or 15 years, to be able to do it like at a top level with a huge level of professionalism within the game. And so we'll see. I think it's generational, and I think that I'm happy that soccer seems to be on the upward tick here within the United States.
Yeah.
So let's move on a little bit here. We've got a lot of great insight there. So thank you for that on coaching in U.S. soccer. But let's move on to your playing career. And I know you said it was the best time of your life. So let's kind of first touch on kind of in high school and your youth career. You weren't a star like from the off. So can you just go into a little bit of that, kind of what your development was like as a player? You obviously had the passion for it, so that's why you stuck with it. But what was your development like?
Yeah, so I grew up in southwestern Virginia, so I like New River Valley, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, Virginia. My dad was actually the vice president at Radford University, so I had access to fields all the time, and I would go down and I'd play with some of the college kids. And actually, my 9th and my 10th grade year, I was really doing it, playing well, but just from where we were located within Virginia, it was like co-ed soccer, and it was like co-ed high school soccer. And I'm not even sure that the club soccer that we had was great. But it did allow me to concentrate, just on the things that I had under my control. So technically I thought I was really good. I'd kind of developed some consistency, some things that I felt would long-term help me become a top level player. And so when I moved out to California, the team that I moved to, the high school that I moved to, was like CIF champions. Unfortunately, I think the coach's son might have been the other goalkeeper, so there was a little bit of a there, and I think it's important that you kind of acknowledge those things, because that's a hurdle. Like, whether or not you recognize it or not, like, it's tough to unseat the coach's son if he's like playing on the state championship team. So I actually played JV the first year that I was out here in California. I started trying to take all these exercises that I'd been doing, all these goalkeeper specific obstacle courses that we tend to do, and actually navigate it so that I could, make it relevant in game. And so it was a lot of learning, a lot of communication. I mean, I had some great people I worked with. My goalkeeper coach, when I was probably that age, was David Vinoli, who was playing for the U.S. national team in 1990 in the Olympics. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't ideal, but I think my junior year, I went to PV High, and then they shut it, and they had brought 3 high schools together, and so then it was like 2,000 people in my graduating class. So my junior and senior year were a little bit tumultuous. And my dad had gone from being the vice president in Virginia to being the vice president at Cal State Dominguez Hills, which is right here, 200 yards probably from the stadium. And so the head coach there had seen me play and offered me a position to come in and be there at the Division II level. So I was there for 2 years.
Were you always a goalkeeper?
I think probably when I was like 13, I think I made the transition. I think I played up top, and I was athletic enough that I just pushed the ball past people and kind of run by them. And I felt like I was a world beater. I don't know, like technically I was very good, but I think once I realized that I could go back and make 5 or 6 saves in a game, and that was very similar to like scoring a goal, if they were good, solid saves. I realized I could be really impactful within it, so I think I was a bit of a glory hound. So either I was going to score goals or I was going to make saves. So I think I eventually found something that I could kind of do on my own. And there was actually a goalkeeper camp, number 1 goalkeeper camp that Dr. Macknick ran that would come through Washington and Lee, which was up in Lexington. Like once a summer, I'd go up there, and very detailed, itemized evaluations that allowed me to really just kind of critique myself and figure out what areas of the game I needed to get better at. And like I said, I mean, it was just kind of like this boiler room of development, just me, a wall, like find like a tree to throw the ball up against. So I got irregular bounces so that I could work on my diving technique. It was like a yard sale out there on the side lot.
That's funny, because I think I've heard of, I think it was Tony Miola. It seems like a lot of top goalkeepers ended up starting as strikers, because I think he was in high school. He led the state in New Jersey in goals, playing up front, and then he moved back.
Matt Reese played at Santa Margarita and was didn't even put on goalkeeper gloves till he was 17, and then ended up at UCLA and playing for New England forever. But my striker skills probably hit a pinnacle around 14, so I'm not sure I would have been that guy.
How did you get from D2 Cal State to UCLA, and then becoming like a viable player for the Galaxy to look at?
Yeah, so I on Thursday nights there's a team called the LA Exiles, and it became Docs Italia, but it was like a group of guys that had played at UCLA probably like 3-4 years before the league had started, and a bunch of expatriates from England, guys that had played maybe growing up over there. But the level was really good, semi-pro here in Manhattan Beach. And so I would go out there and I would train with these guys. I mean, training was intense. It was like going to this professional club on Thursday nights. And the goalkeeper that played on that team was Drew Leonard, who actually was the goalkeeper coach at UCLA at that time. So then before you know it, I've got David Vinoli, who had been at UCLA. I've got Drew Leonard, who was at UCLA. Maureen Kano was my coach at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and Kano had been like one of the assistants for Siggy at one point. So before you know it, I had 3 former UCLA goalkeepers that knew me well enough to let Siggy know that, hey, this kid's transferring schools. Like, if he was to walk on, would he have the opportunity to do so? And so I walked on, redshirted my junior year. I played behind Chris Nitko my junior year, who actually played in the Olympics back then. And then he got injured, so I played maybe a season and a half. Matt Reese was behind me, Ramondo was behind him, so it was like a goalkeeping factory at that point. So I was really lucky to get that opportunity. I mean, the guys that we competed against on a regular basis. I mean, it's like Ante Razov, Eddie Lewis, Craig Vanny, like all these guys that went on to have pretty successful careers.
Yeah. And then that led you on to the Galaxy noticing you.
Yeah, no, I think so. We were like ranked number one like the whole year, my senior year, and we ended up playing like Cal State Fullerton, who's like our biggest rival, like 16 times, and they won one time, and it just happened to be the first round of the playoffs away. And after the game, you know, I didn't want to be done. I mean, I guess I'd always kind of planned on, you know, packing up a tent and like just traveling around Europe and trying to get people to try like go on trial. But I actually paid my own way down to Orlando. I mean, not Orlando, to Tampa. I think they had some type of a goalkeeper clinic that, you know, that they had kind of set up this combine. So I went down, did this goalkeeping combine. I felt pretty confident the way that I'd performed. I found out later that I think that they were going to try to pick me up anyway, but I forced them into using the draft pick because I went down to Florida. So, so I think at that point I hopped back on the plane from Florida. I landed. My dad told me that I'd gotten drafted while I was in the air. So I kind of celebrated that small win, and yeah, I think that was probably in February. I went and told my teachers that I was going to go down to Mexico for this preseason. And I kind of, at that point, I had 2 quarters left and kind of dropped out of school. When I entered, it was like me, myself, and David Kramer. David Kramer had been somebody that I looked up to in 1996, solid goalkeeper from Fresno State. And, you know, all of a sudden May comes around and it's a situation where, you know, Campos is coming back. And I'm like, oh, I guess they have to make a decision about it's going to be me or
just for everybody who doesn't know, this is
kind of like I didn't realize, I was probably naive that this was going to happen like here in 3 weeks. I was just trying to prove that I was a valuable asset to the team.
And for anybody who doesn't know, this is legendary Mexican goalkeeper Jorge Campos. Came out of you know, playing for Mexico in the World Cup '94. You know, big star. You know, big you know, star player for the Galaxy too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he would only come up in June, you know, so it was like
that's true.
So it was like a summer vacation. He'd come up and play for the Galaxy. And I got a
and he played forward too, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, like once I, you know, I kind of solidified myself as the second goalkeeper in LA. Like it's probably the most prestigious spot because you would always know, like with 15 to 20 minutes to go in the game, like Campos was going up top. So I mean, like every game in 1997 and 98, like during crunch time, like Campos is like going up top, and I'm like popping in the goal and getting like solid like 20 minutes in crunch time for this team in LA. So I mean, I was really fortunate, I think, to have that opportunity. And then they had the 98 expansion draft. I got picked up by Chicago, and with Danny Pena, myself and Danny Pena got swapped back to LA, but LA had to send Campos and Armas. So it was actually a pretty big trade at the time. I mean, obviously Armas was a legend for, you know, Chicago for a really long time. So, but I got to stay in LA, so it was cool.
What'd you think of Campos's goalkeeper kits? Did he design his own when he's with the Galaxy as well? Didn't he have like the really colorful ones and just?
Yeah, I mean, the equipment manager here, Raul Vargas, would always help him come up with some stuff. He didn't necessarily do as much of the surf stuff that he was doing down in Miami, but yeah, he understood the game extremely well. You know, so he was like a soccer personality. I mean, there are things I took away from him. It was always cool to see. You know, he would jump up and like leave the ball because he knew that it was past the runners, the near post, and just let it run out innocently at the far side, like where he probably could have caught it. But I think I honestly, like he was always a decent person to me. He always considered himself to be like one of the luckiest guys alive. You know, he grew up cliff diving in Acapulco, and now all of a sudden he's driving a Ferrari down Sunset Strip. So he was always very very humble about the fact that he was fortunate to be where he was.
I read somewhere, didn't you make your first team debut versus Aston Villa?
I did, yeah, right after they signed Stan Collymore for some like record-breaking sum. So here's all of a sudden this guy, like I was playing for like 24 grand for the first 3 years of my soccer career, and this guy coming in just signed a new record deal. I'm like, man, this guy's gonna be like 3,000 times the player I am, and you know, I was really excited to get to play against an English team. You know, I grew up watching Schmeichel and the Man United guys, you know, so it was cool to kind of just gauge myself against, you know, top players like that.
And then it seemed to me, from what I was remembering back, and I was looking back through your info in your career, it seemed like you emerged in '98 as a consistent starter with the Galaxy. And from what I remember, it seemed like, you know, was there an adjustment there for you from the college game to the pro game? You can just talk a little bit about that in '98, and then '99, top goalkeeper.
Yeah, of course. I think in 1998, I got sent back to LA from this expansion draft. I never actually went to Chicago, but I came back to the team. Campos had left, so now it was literally probably just me that was even on the roster. I think at that point they might have added Matt Reeves because I think UCLA might have won the Final Four in '97. So Matt came on. It's myself and Matt, and we just competed, you know. But I was fortunate to get to play behind what I thought was probably one of the funnest teams in MLS history to watch. I mean, it was like Clint Mathis, like Welton and Machon, and we were just bombing forward. I mean, we'd win games like 7-4, but I mean, like Ezra was gone the whole time playing right wing, so I didn't really have a right back defensively most of the time. It was, I mean, I played with some guys like Greg Vanny, like Robin Frazier. I mean, like I had some guys that were like soccer, like masterminds in front of me. Like they talked the game all the time. They wanted communication. So I think they really helped shape, you know, how I manage players from behind. Zach Abdel, who's currently the goalkeeper coach at LAFC, came on board and, you know, started trying to, you know, change my game, you know, at a point where I probably thought that I kind of had developed some pretty legitimate techniques, and he changed some things that I thought, now that I look back on it, were probably, you know, really decent things for me to work on, and kind of innovative. So I thought that helped a lot, you know. And so 1998 was fine. '99, won goalkeeper of the year. I think, you know, 2003, I thought actually was probably one of my best years, but I didn't win it that year. I don't know who did, but I did feel like that probably 2003, like things were clicking.
What were some of those techniques that were changed? Kind of back then, was it more goalkeepers were you not as good with your feet in general as a position, or were you not asked to build out of the back?
Yeah, I mean, obviously things have evolved a lot. Like now it feels like a goalkeeper like these days, it's like a coach more often than not would rather just have a sweeper than a goalkeeper. So I think that's something that currently continues to evolve. But, you know, one of the things that I vividly remember working with Zach on was, you know, high balls into the top corner. I'd always kind of been like a top hand guy. Like I would dive and I'd come across and touch it here. And he was like, well, if your legs are strong enough, why would you take the hand that's further away and try to match it up across your body as you're flying through the air? So, so a lot of it would just be leg strength. And I mean, I think the other day, the things I would be able to compare Lloris and how he's 6'7" and struggled to keep the shot out from West Ham. And then I don't know if you saw the Andre Blake save the other day to the right, where he, like, if you look at Andre Blake's like legitimately off the ground, and Lloris is probably 6'6", I would imagine. I don't even know, but he's not off the ground, and, you know, getting scored on from 30. So I just, you know, kind of started developing this, you know, my legs to the point where that I could take my low hand and I could get my low hand and I could get it into the top corner. So a lot of pushing off, a lot of diving. But he pushed me hard, you know, he motivated me. You know, there's a lot of back and forth. I think he made me a stronger person and goalkeeper mentally. But from a technical standpoint, I can say for sure, like I wouldn't have ever tried, you know, taking my low hand and getting into the top corner with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a field player, and it's interesting how little we know about your position. You guys know a bit more about our position, but we just look at you and it's in a sense, you're a different sport almost, because you're so separate with your individual training and all that. But it's such an important position for the team as a whole, obviously.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
it used
actually
to be more
remember.
analytical. It
Yeah.
used to be like now I'm always like, oh, can you make a save in this zone of the field? And back then it was like, well, you have like, these are the techniques for breakaways. These are the techniques for like crosses inside the goal area and from wide areas and boxing. And so like you have all these like techniques. So it's like, honestly, I think for a long time, the way that I looked at goalkeeping was exactly the way that it had been laid out in that evaluation that I got back when I was 14 or 15, and it certainly evolved since then. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of little nuances within, goalkeeper vernacular. I think we're like, we call it like the goalkeeper union, but I think there's
Yes.
sometimes where I think we're hiding from the realities of the game over the obstacle courses.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about? I read some of the other interviews you've done where you touched on the MLS Cup '99, the second goal, that kind of being like a low point of your career, but also propelling you further forward.
Yeah, no, I think in 1999, as we talked about, I'd had like a goalkeeper of the year performance, and so we made it to the final. LA had crashed out in 1996 in epic fashion to DC United in a rainstorm, and so this was our second chance. And to be honest, the guys that I played with were really good people, and I felt like really connected to this group. And I think Robin Fraser might have gone down early with some type of a shoulder injury, so that put us kind of behind the 8 ball. I received a pass back, and I was just going to clip it over Ben Olsen, and I got caught in the whatever, the turf, the dirt or whatever it was up there in New England, and so passed the ball directly to him. He just passed it at the back of the goal. So yeah, I think once I lost that game, it was also the end of my contract. I told you that I played the first 3 years. It would have been 97, 98, 99. So I was hoping to come off that 99 year and then go to Europe. And so I ended up, I went to Belgium, and I kind of went everywhere. But before I left, I think I had like 2 weeks where I was just kind of like super bummed about how the year ended, and like how my poor performance had affected the guys that I cared so much about, and I remember probably name drop like 3 or 4 different UCLA goalkeepers, but there's another one by the name of Tim Harris, and Tim Harris is currently, I think, the vice president of the Lakers or something, but he's pretty high up in that organization. And I received a letter from him, and I never really had met Tim, and he said, Kevin, you probably don't know me, but like, I followed your career. I also played at UCLA. He goes, listen, tough break. He goes, but remember, like, you can either make this a defining moment in your career, or you can make this a footnote. And I thought that was really cool. First, that this person had like gone out of his way to write this to me. But second, about like, just how it fit so much with my philosophy, and I needed to stop being such a wimp and like get on with what was at hand. And so yeah, I mean, I got offered a contract in Belgium at Genk, and I think at that point, like, the MLS found out that I was over there, and they're like quadrupled whatever their offer was or something. So I had the willingness to go over there and do it, rather than just offering me a legitimate contract to begin with. So and then once to go over, they eat mayonnaise on their French fries. Like, that's just not me, dude. I don't do that. That's weird. So I come back to LA and take over the position and just kind of trudge forward with the club. And so I came back and started banging away again in 2000 back here in LA.
What was that in 2000? You guys won the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Is that what it was called back then? Can you tell me about that experience a little bit, and what it was like playing down in those kind of Central American countries, and any stories from that?
This is the best part, and this is why it doesn't really count, but it does count. So we won that CONCACAF Champions Cup, but it was a tournament, and it was all here in Los Angeles. So we didn't have to go do any of this traveling. So everybody's like, oh, well, they've never won in Mexico, and they've never done this. And So I was actually part of the FC Dallas team that was the first team to win down in Mexico. We beat Pumas, and then in that 2000 CONCACAF Champions Cup, we won it, but it was like a tournament where we stayed in Fullerton and like played down in the Coliseum. So I think we probably had the best chance to actually win it that anybody's ever had.
I'll still give.
Okay.
I was just gonna say I'll still give you the credit.
Yeah, thanks. Nobody else knows that, so I'm just like, we had to beat all these teams from the CONCACAF and Central South America, and like, we loved, like we had all of our fans were at every game.
What would you say from throughout? I don't want to jump too far or throughout, just gloss over your career at the Galaxy, but what would you say are some of the real highlights from those years, like especially after that '99 year and then after coming back from Belgium and signing on, now you're committed. What were some of the highlights from the next several years that you want to touch on that you think would be, were really important to you, really momentous?
The guys I played with, I think, like, look back on my career, and it's really about the relationships that I made throughout it. I was fortunate to play here in LA. UCLA was obviously churning out players, so I had the opportunity to play for like a long time with Matt Reese and Sasha Victorine and Peter Vallenas, and a lot of guys that would come in. And Ante was there for a while, and Eddie Lewis eventually came back. But I think in 2003. Like I said, I thought I was probably playing some of the best soccer in my career. Landon came in 2004, and obviously that changed the, what kind of money that we had to work with, throughout the rest of the roster. 2005, we won the championship again. So winning at 2002 and 2005, they're pretty different experiences. In 2002, I thought like we legitimately deserved to win it because emphatically we were like the best team in the league at that point. Carlos Ruiz was on fire. And I just remember coming down into the Arroyo, like in Pasadena in 2002, like it was like, just like, whose butt are we going to kick this week? It was like just this confidence that we had. And it was fun to watch. 2005, it was almost like we took the roster in, or the starting lineup that we wanted, because we were kind of up and down. I think we finished in 8th place. But we knew that we were going to be held accountable for winning the championship. And so we said, well, this is the group that we want to play with. And, gave it to Steve, and Samson was like, okay, let's do it then, and we went after it, and we knew that, kind of the weight was on our shoulders, and fortunately for us, we were able to win it again in Frisco and open up the stadium down there in Texas in the right way with an LA Galaxy championship.
How important do you think the relationships that you built with the guys through the years were to the LA Galaxy's success?
Yeah, I will say this: every team that I ever won a championship with, or even made an MLS Cup final, it was a good, solid group of people. At FC Dallas, I think David Ferreira and like Jair and a couple of those guys, it was like there's a Spanish speaking contingent, and it was a little bit difficult for us to communicate all the time, but there was a massive amount of respect throughout the locker room, and I always think like every, I talked about the 2001 group and the 99 group and the 2002 group, like these were like tight groups. And, I find it difficult sometimes to not see the type of team chemistry that we had built, within some of those championship teams, and how it's perceived. I think it was not necessarily that the team chemistry came from us winning. It was like the team chemistry is what made us win, and so one of those things that I always try to relate to the groups that we're working with.
If you had gone to Genk or one of the other, maybe another club in Europe, do you think that would have changed the perception of yourself within the context of the national team, and possibly got you more opportunities for caps?
I was never wanting for opportunity at the national team level. I think Bruce and Bob always gave me, the ability to come in and perform, and I just, I don't know if it was that I didn't necessarily set my ambitions high enough or what the case may be, but, I was there all the time, for 10 or 12 years. It wasn't like I didn't have an opportunity, and I think some of the games, if I would have come in and, just got shutouts or had a real comfortability about it, maybe they would have been forced into giving me more opportunities if I was playing in Belgium. But, I always felt like I had a fair opportunity. I just didn't necessarily feel like I'd taken advantage of it as well as I probably could have.
In fairness, you're going up against two of the greatest goalkeepers in U.S., like Brad Friedel, Casey Keller. The competition during that time was.
Yeah, Tim Howard was there, and
Right.
I mean, the reality was, I mean, it was a pretty crowded lineup, so even to be able to get 6 caps in the midst of that, and I was backing up some qualifiers. I mean, I felt like there was opportunity there. I just, I didn't really, put together any like consistent performances where they're like, I kind of forced their hand. But I mean, that was one of the things I've always really respected about Bruce and Bob is like, hey, like if you're playing well, like it doesn't matter like where you're coming from. On these podcasts, no offense to you guys, but it's always like, oh, well, like we need to start this guy just because he's in Europe. I mean, I think that's garbage too. I mean, like the guy's sitting on a bench like for 6-7 months and there's somebody just crushing it. And like, I'd rather have Andre Blake come in and play for me right now than somebody that's been sitting like, unfortunately, Horvath's been sitting on the bench for 13 months. Like I don't think it's a given. I think they would have to come in and compete for it, but I don't think anybody gets the benefit of the doubt because, just that. I mean, it's got to be backed up with like concrete evidence that this is the reality.
Yeah, Zach's definitely the same spot, same boat. He doesn't. I mean, he's playing with a massive club, but he just plays League Cup games, and that's just it.
So I mean, if you come in and you do it, great. But I mean, I don't think it's just that. I mean, I think that coaches realize like, hey, I mean, it's one thing to put together your favorite group of 18 players on a soccer forum. It's a totally different thing to come in and actually make a team that's going to be competitive. And I mean, a lot of people behind keyboards that can come up with the best lineup, after the fact, or just based on who's at this big club or that big club. I mean, the reality is that there's some really solid options within both sets of players.
I think that's just one of the perceptions amongst the fans. That's why I didn't know that about the opportunity with Genk, and so like that perception that
no, you're right. It is a perception. No, I mean, I agree. It's 100% a perception. I mean, you're taking a chance like going to a new league. I mean, does that make you somebody that's willing to take more risks and it's bigger? I mean, for me, and I think Landon ended up coming back and didn't really kind of duke it out over there. But, for these people, I mean, it's like there's a quality of life issue and there's a comfortability issue that comes into, living a life within the game, and it's one thing to like say, hey, well, I'll go down and I'll play at Galatasaray for 3 years and then go live there for 3 years. I don't want to go live in there.
Yeah.
I'm living in LA, man. Like, why would I want to, like, I'd rather have to work harder later in my life than have to go like, deal with the uncomfortability or the difficulties that are inherent to that sometimes. So, that makes me weak. I mean, you could say I'm weak, but I think I've battled through enough things within my life to not really have to deal with the connotation.
When you were playing with Donovan, did he open up to you in any way about those years when he kind of went from, was he at Bayern Munich and he came back and then he went?
No, I mean, at one point, but I don't know what the heck we talked about. Maybe what was on TV, but we certainly didn't, break down scenarios like that. I probably identified with it, from some perspectives because I had kind of done something similar. There was, I love Los Angeles. I wanted to live in Los Angeles. I went to college within 200 yards of the club. I'm back at the club now. Like, we talk about, like club history. You talk about club history, like, dude, this is my club. And I think, I feel like I'm well treated here. I feel like we have a history here. I feel like there's a level of expectation that I want to be held accountable to. And, I mean, I think if Landon feels most comfortable and wants to win and play here, I never saw his form drop from a national team perspective. I mean, every time that I go back and I watch the top moments of World Cups, he's usually involved, so, and then when he's not involved, I see us be really average. So, you know, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal in the long run anyway.
That's a great point, especially with how MLS has grown through the years. Credit to the guys like you who started it. The level is really good, and like with Klinsmann, he wanted all the players in Europe. But I do think it's a good point that players can also be successful staying domestically, staying in their comfort zone. Someone like Jordan Morris, just because he's playing with Seattle his whole career doesn't mean he can't be an important player for the national team in the next cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I guess my question would be, you know, what is going to drive that development? You know, and if it's from external, you know, external perspective, you know, maybe that competitive nature that competitive environment that they're in isn't like pulls them in that direction. But you could also say, hey, listen, like this could be somebody that's intrinsically motivated and just wants to be the best player that they can be. And you know, if that's them in a soccer ball and like just trying to like make it a work of art, like you don't necessarily need to be in some like foreign locale to have that happen, you know. And I think that Jordan Morris is somebody that's overcome a lot of adversity in the last number of years, and for me, is a top player right now.
Was it during his time with the Galaxy that you?
Sorry, Dave. What was that, Kev?
I also don't believe that Christian Pulisic and Reyna are players that grew into the players that they are because they're in Europe. I mean, these are guys that are like playing at classics and you know playing at the CFC. You know, I mean, so these are like American kids that like they didn't go over there and 3 months later they like developed this unbelievable ability to play at the top level. These are guys like American kids like over there crushing it.
Right. Go on, Dave.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I remember reading online. I was, you know, looking up some of the past interviews and stuff that you had mentioned that Zidane was the best player that you had played against. Was it during this time with the Galaxy, or was it later on? You know, during a friendly.
Yeah, no, we played against Real Madrid here at the stadium, I think in 2005. So it was like Roberto Carlos, Beckham was on that team, Michael Owen was on that team, Zidane was on that team, Figo was on that team. It was a pretty legit group of guys.
Galacticos and Zidane, that still holds up today. He was the best player that you played against.
Yeah, no, I mean that was probably pretty recent that I probably said that, but yeah, I thought Henri was pretty ridiculous, but I didn't have the opportunity to really meet Zidane, so I don't really know what his natural tendencies were, but I'd actually got put out of a game playing against Henri at some point because of something that I thought was a little bit cheesy. So I don't know. I think that for me, I'll still stick with Zidane. But I mean, that entire group of players, that Real Madrid team, you know, is probably the best team in the world at that point. So, yeah. But I mean, Henri played with Invincibles. Cahill was good. I'm trying to think the guys I played with at the Galaxy. Yeah, I mean, they weren't world superstars, but those guys were. I mean, FIFA World Player of the Year. I mean, I had the opportunity to kind of play against 2 World Players of the Years at some point. That was an honor. I mean, they were just a different level. I mean, Henri was like 6'4" and like stronger than like 3 people. So I feel like send 3 like guys out there to like try to defend him, and he just kind of shield the ball like it was nothing. But it was intriguing for sure.
Yeah, I remember watching the old Arsenal teams at Highbury, and they all looked about 10 feet tall. It must have been the camera angle or something, but those guys they looked like they weren't human. But actually, Clint Mathis is a cult hero in my hometown because he came to I think it was when he was with the Metro Stars or Red Bull, whatever they're called at the time. He came to just a youth soccer camp, and we all met him. And it was back in the days when he had the mohawk for the World Cup. He recently scored the goal, so he's a bit of a cult hero in my kind of high school friend group. So.
Yeah, he grew up down in Conyers. He was my roommate out here at the Galaxy. Yeah, and Clint is somebody that you know is still living out here in California. Sometimes somebody I see fairly regularly, but yeah, he went to Furman. My sister went to Furman, so I understand that neck of the woods, and I think he might have actually played for the Atlanta Lightning back in the day. But yeah, certainly a cult hero there in the Southeast.
Mm-hmm. So being an LA guy, right? I mean, you're UCLA, LA Galaxy, everything. What was it like when you had to move on from the Galaxy. Was it 2005 was your last season? So what was that like? 2006?
2006, we wrapped things up, and I think Frank Yallop was at the helm at that point. Maybe Alexi Lawless might have been around. Paul Bravo, your buddy from last week. I think they brought Joe Cannon to the team, and I was like, what? I figured it was about time for me to pack up and figure out what was going to be my next step. And yeah, I was disappointed. But I was also, I'm also somebody that tries to find ways to constantly frame things in a way that is conducive to whatever my next step is. And so for me, it was an opportunity to, go to Kansas City, prove that I was able to do it away from home, and went to Kansas City with a lot of hope and optimism about what that would be about. Obviously the Hunts had just sold the program to, On Goal and that group of investors out there. So they just built a new practice facility. So there were some good things happening. I was excited about it.
What would be like your thoughts on I'm actually thinking now about what some of the things you're saying about the league, the quality of the league. And, we were talking about some of the top players that you were playing against with Real Madrid and then Henry. So what are your thoughts about players that like Ibrahimovic, Ashley Cole, that have come into the league and played in MLS, but may have had some negative things to say about the league either before or after their experiences in the league? And then when we look at, a guy like Jordan Morris, Len Donovan, yourself, really quality players that have played in MLS. What are your thoughts about, those types of players, Ibrahimovic and so forth?
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's going to come in with opinions about different things, but I think the reality is that somebody was able to sell them on coming and being a part of this environment, and I think that the league has only been around for 25 years. And I think the expectation that, that people have, in terms of, where we would be 25 years into this thing, I don't think that we would think that we would be as far along as we are. If you look at Charlotte, we're selling, franchises for $300 million, and you've got, Ibrahimovic is coming here. You've got just some absolutely great players, whether it's the young South American players that are coming through now, or whether it's the guys that are coming over like Chicharito or some of the guys later, like maybe a little bit later in their career. But the reality is there's talented players here, and it's an athletic league. And if you come and you're not really ready to deal with, that type of a league that has quite a bit of adversity, whether it's through the travel or whether it's, the different climates that you're kind of playing in, it's dynamic. And if you're not able to really solve that problem, it's easy to just say, oh, well, this is ridiculous. Or like if an international coach comes in and they're like, what do you mean I can't go buy all the players that I want to? Like, it just shows the naivete of like, how did you not know that was like a part of the infrastructure of this league when you came? It's insane for me to kind of, hear players complaining about things that are just a reality for a lot of us, and so, it comes off of a little bit arrogant sometimes, for me. It's like you're in a league that's like 25 years old. You're where it's like there's a group of people that have kind of passed the torch along, and it's up to that group to kind of build it up and continue to build this thing. To compare a league that's 20 years old with a league that's 125 years old that's ridiculous to me. All you can really do is take a snapshot of where we are right now and where we came from. I grew up in a time where my sophomore year in high school or college, there wasn't even a professional league in the United States, so I just think it's a disservice to the guys that didn't get an opportunity to play professional soccer. So for how far that we've come, I think the business has developed. I think the soccer has come a long way. And I think we can keep pushing, we can keep making it whatever we want to make it. I'm just happy that I'm going to be involved in that conversation.
It's an interesting point. I'm sure you get asked this all the time. This is a kind of a keyboard question with the pro rel, it is in every other country besides the US. And now MLS is completely different. The way it was built and the way it's been sustainable is because they haven't overspent. And once you buy into the league, your investment is safe. And that's one of the great parts about MLS from an ownership perspective. But where do you think the promotion relegation argument fits in with MLS and even the lower leagues, USL Championship, League One, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard Alexi say it before, like just build a better mousetrap, like find some way to make it happen. I think that, I think that the ability is there, within capitalism to make things that work. I just think it's super dynamic. And I think one of the things that you'll see within single entity is it's probably a lot easier to have everybody pulling in one direction than it is to try to go and like reinvent this thing. I think, yeah, certainly. I think, the last couple of days of a season when you have promotion and relegation are great. I think people being able to kind of invest in their infrastructure and do things in the right way so that it pays off better is an asset. I mean, I think within MLS that there are teams that sit on their investment and just wait for it to kind of, appreciate and then look to sell it off. I'm not sure that that's the answer. But the fact that we have a sustainable soccer league within the United States is something I won't ever take for granted because I was around when that wasn't the truth. And I think that the way that I played was a tribute to that. The way that I still care about the game now, there's nothing that I hate more than when somebody, doesn't at least give respect to the amount of work that's gone in on this front. And if things can evolve and things can change and somebody can come up with a promotion relegation system within the United States that makes sense. I mean, I know enough about business to think that it would be pretty difficult for somebody to put themselves on equal footing with a team that just came in for free and they spent $300 million for it. I think that just doesn't really strike me as something that makes logical sense. But, if there's a way to, over time to create some type of a system where, all these things being equal, that you can have promotion relegation. I think probably the best youth soccer that I ever saw was when Coast Soccer League was here in California. It was promotion relegation, but soccer and the pro game within the US are maybe a little bit different, so we'll see. I'm excited to kind of see how it shakes out over the long term. I mean, we've got close to 30 teams now probably that are signed up for MLS. If you do it again, you just have a couple different levels of the league and promotion relegation within that, and it could happen.
What do you think? You mentioned before about MLS being a feeder league, and what do you think about that as being the league's perception now? Is it a good one for the league?
Yeah, I don't really understand, what the negative connotation is here. Like we're losing players to the top leagues in the world. Like, the money, and it's kind of like the same thing. I don't think that we're not a good league because we're only 25 years old and we're only 25 and we're not able to spin off the same types of money that the Premier League is. I don't think that makes us inadequate. I mean, I think probably Belgium and Holland and all these other leagues throughout the world have just identified their clubs as clubs that will feed the top things and that will make them sustainable, and I think that you can have a blend of that. I think that, it's okay to, have some American superstars within our league so that, the local fan bases have somebody that they can really identify with. But if I can sell a player for $10 million and I can pay for our academy for 5 years, then why would I not do that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think you're trying to find a balance of, what makes your club what your club is, and then also making it something that's financially sustainable, and so I don't know, like a lot of people don't really want to talk about that, but as a director of soccer operations, that's something that comes through my mind on occasion, so it's this constant balance, I mean, it'd be great to be able to keep all of our players, but you want to be able to produce enough that there's not enough room, and you have to make some tough decisions. So I think that's where we are right now. Let's produce as many good players as we possibly can and put them in an environment where they can be successful and win trophies and put ourselves in the difficult situation where we maybe have to sell some people.
Dave brings that up all the time, actually. He's always saying that he thinks, I actually played in Ireland a few years ago, and he's always saying, like, coaches in Ireland don't understand how important it is to sell on players because that's how you remain, so that's how you stay in business. Like, that's how clubs don't go bankrupt and all that. So it's a great point. The one question I would have though in terms of MLS is, do you think they restrict the movements of players, the young kind of American player, too much? Just with the way, like I mean, I've never played in MLS, but with friends that I've had, they've been on like the 1+4 options and all that. I know you're. Do you think that's appropriate? Do you think they should be?
So in 2009, I finished up at Kansas City, and Kansas City held my rights, and they didn't make. I don't think they made a legitimate offer, or they just whatever. So either way, they had my rights, and they could sit on my rights, and literally could have forced me into retirement. Fortunately, FC Dallas was able to come in and have some type of a conversation with Peter, relinquish whatever rights I had, so that I could go down to Dallas and play. But yeah, I mean, in essence, they could force you into retirement within this league, but theoretically, I could have, hopped on a plane and gone somewhere else and tried to play. I mean, I think at that point I was probably almost 35 years old, so I'm not sure what the market value would have been. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, it's kind of like you want to play in the sandbox. Sometimes you have to play by the rules, and unfortunately, I think those are things that are just a part of the league being only 25 years old, and a lot of those things, if you look at the CBAs and the NFL and you look at the CBAs in Major League Baseball, like a lot of like free agency type things came through, union and labor negotiations. They didn't just come because people were good people, it comes through this process. Like, okay, well, if you want this, then we need this. And and it comes a lot slower than you want it to. It comes every 5 years or 8 years, or whatever the case may be with some of these CBA negotiations. And so, yeah, I mean, things are a lot better now. When I was there was no free agency for kids over 28 or 5 years of playing or whatever the case may be. I don't even know what the current rule is, but it wasn't ever something that you got to go and negotiate with multiple teams. Like, you negotiated with the league and they put you where they want you. I guess the big exception to that would be when Paul Caligiuri was told he was going to go to LA, and then he got sent to Columbus. He had to sue the league to get them to send him eventually to LA. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the single entity thing is difficult from that perspective, but if you don't have single entity, you get in a situation like we had within the NASL, where they almost put each other, out of business by, pushing up the salaries to a point where they were unsustainable, so I think that there's probably a pro and a con to kind of all these, and, you're trying to figure out how to navigate through all this stuff at a really, critical time for soccer within the United States.
Yeah, I was in the NASL the last year before it went tits up. So from personal experience, I can tell you that it's a dangerous game to be playing, especially at the time it was second division and guys were getting paid six figures, but more than MLS salaries. And we were just sitting there, like, I was there the last 2 years of the league, and we were sitting there like, these salaries are ridiculous. Richie Ryan, who's a 33-year-old defensive midfielder from Ireland, good player, great player, but like, he's a 6, and he got bought for $750,000 by Miami FC. And we were like, this is not lasting. And obviously, it didn't.
That was when traffic was in full swing, right? I remember those days.
Yeah.
How are we on time, Kevin? Do you have to run, or are we okay?
Yeah, I'm famished, but I probably have another 10 minutes in me.
I don't want to keep you from lunch or lunch or whatever, late lunch or whatever. Just really quick, how did you get the nickname El Gato?
So there's a reporter for La Opinión out here, our Spanish newspaper, and I think within the first number of months that I was getting the games, I think he liked how, I don't know, I guess I like to call my goalkeeping style cat style. So maybe he thought I was like a cat. So I don't know if I was quick or I was agile or what it was that made him call me El Gato, but he was the one that came up with it. And I always thought it was really cool because in LA, it's just such like a melting pot, and I mean, there's certain sectors of the city that you kind of go and it's like a pretty Latin American population, and to get that type of support from the Latin American community, I thought was really cool, so it gave me kind of an identity within the club and within the community that I've always been really proud of.
Jake, do you have another one?
I don't have anything else, so we'll let
Oh,
you
okay.
you have another one?
Yeah, I was just gonna.
Okay, go for it. I was gonna let him
Yeah.
eat lunch, but go for it.
Yeah, I just, I was looking through some of the players, and you've mentioned so many great players from throughout the years. Even guys you got to play with, like later in your career, like Jimmy Conrad, Eddie Johnson, Breck Shea, some of the Mexican players, Carlos Hermosillo, Luis Hernandez. Is there any interesting stories from any of these players, or even the players we talked about from your career that we didn't touch on? Any funny stories? Just when you look back, you just chuckle and laugh. Something you can share with us.
Oh man, I already told you that I've had a lot of concussions, so I'm not sure if I have a lot of funny stories to go through. But I did think it was pretty ironic that the guys that you mentioned from Kansas City, whether it's Jimmy Conrad, Jack Jewsbury, Davey Arnaud, like these were like Kansas City guys from like 2000 and probably 3 to 2010. And I just thought it was so sad. Like as soon as they opened up that new stadium, they sent Jack Jewsbury to Portland. They sent Jimmy somewhere. Like all this like old guard got sent somewhere else right when they built this brand new stadium. So I thought that was pretty funny, but it's unfortunately at some of my friends' expense. So talk about like being mistreated by the club. I always thought that was so bad that those guys had like spent so much time working and digging and doing everything they could to represent the Wizards and sporting in a good way, and then to see that new stadium and it's like this cathedral of soccer in the Midwest, and then they got shipped off somewhere. So I felt probably no better feeling of being a professional athlete than that.
All right. Well, we don't want to keep it any longer. We really appreciate your time and taking the time to come on. And it's been a real pleasure for me. A lot of fun talking about your career, about your thoughts on the game now, MLS, where we're going. And real highlight, real pleasure for me to have you on, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, David. Jake, I think, for me, if you need to cut it up and get rid of some of the crap I said and put some new stuff, you can put a deep fake in or whatever you guys need to make this thing look right. You guys feel free.
No, we don't do much editing. We just go with what we have, and you were a great guest. I think your perspective on MLS and being an MLS kind of lifer as you are was very interesting, because you hear on all the podcasts, all the TV, ESPN FC, you hear all the guys talking about the Europe, and they see the starting 11 and of the quote unquote best 11 of the national team, and it's all guys who are playing at this big club, that Barcelona, Chelsea, whatever, all the big clubs. And it's definitely a different perspective, but definitely
it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, got to come together and actually function. I think it's fun to kind of do that stuff, but even on social media.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Kevin.
Take care. So that was Jake. What'd you think of the interview with Kevin Hartman? That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, another great guest. We keep getting these elite guests, don't we, David Boy?
Elite. That's what we are. We are the elite podcast in all of soccer podcasting. So of course, yes, Jake, we will have elite guests.
Yeah. So Kevin is someone that he was very modest, I think, in kind of describing his playing career. He is arguably the best goalkeeper in MLS history, and definitely up there in the top 5 or 10. And the career that he had, just being in MLS for 17 years, he learned so much about the league. He was there since the second season of the league, so he knows the ins and outs of MLS. And to hear him be so complimentary about the way the standard of the league, the players in it, and in terms of their national team opportunities, it was very interesting, and it was definitely something that I think national team coaches should probably listen to. I think he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you're saying there. I would think he would be number one, number two. He's up there as far. Tony Neal also, especially as he matured, as a goalkeeper. Neal, I thought he got better and later in his career. I think he got a little bit better technically. But Kevin was a phenomenal player to watch throughout the years, and I remember watching him from the very beginning with the Galaxy in those games he was mentioning, where the score. I remember one game, we'd be watching the Metro Stars games and watching one of those games, the Galaxy, and it was an absolute gunslinging type game, high scoring game, a lot of goals on both sides. And it's funny to hear him mentioning the fullbacks pushing forward and real open, and guys like Clint Mathis that you mentioned, and others from that era, scored a lot of goals, and very, very interesting. It was nice that the interview, I thought, took a turn for more of the current landscape in MLS, and his thoughts on, especially being academy director for the Galaxy. I think it was nice to touch into the past, but get a lot of the present as well. And then I just thought that, for anybody who doesn't think that MLS is a quality league, or if they have, negative things to say about MLS, I think the other side to it is listening to that interview, or having, if you were ever able to get a chance to talk to Kevin, or maybe somebody like Kevin who, feels very passionate about the league, and for a lot of good reasons. And, his fuel is fire from being a guy that, paved the way for the current generations and future generations. I think, the one question, I think, as far as the quality of, quality suffering from, I do think the quality has gone down a bit as the number of clubs has expanded so quickly. My own personal opinion, not,
You think, like, compared to when? Like, when do you, so chart out MLS for us. When do you think, so at the beginning, how was the quality compared to 2000 versus 2005 versus 2010, 15, and now present day?
I think I'd have to go back and look at the number of teams per year, but I think, in some of Kevin's years with the Galaxy, and then, some of the years, with Kansas City, I think, the league sort of stabilized after a certain point, where originally you only had a few owners. And I think you got to a point where you didn't have too many teams, but you had a lot of good players coming through, and that, like, steel sharpens steel, iron sharpens iron. I think it could translate throughout sports as well. When even, we are a soccer podcast, but when you look at a sport like hockey, you used to have those dynasty teams from, back in the day, when you had all these top players. And I think in MLS earlier days, I just think that you were able to put together more of not an all-star team, but somewhat of an all-star team. And now I think you do have, it is changing again, because you are getting in a lot of players from South America. But I think in that early 2000s, where you had a lot of really, really good players playing together, as the league did expand very quickly, and it's hard for anybody, any country, to just produce, a bunch, as Kevin said, 20 players per team, whatever. It's hard to just roll out another 20 players, boom, new franchise, here's 20 more MLS players. I think now, definitely, you don't need as many American players, but also I think it's easier now with the USL leagues having, really gained a foothold. Where you roll out the Charlotte team next year, you could bring some guys up from the lower leagues and put them into MLS, and they fit right in. But yeah. I think going back to that era before you did have USL, but it wasn't quite as established. When you'd see guys, it reached a certain point where the guys coming up generally, there wasn't a lot of them coming up even at that point. You got sort of the cream rose to the top, I thought.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I personally think the league is better now than it ever has been in terms of quality, but I do see your point in terms of watered down. I think there's so many good players, especially the South American players that seem to be migrating north to America. There's so many of them, and it seems to be there's so much fewer American players in the starting 11 for MLS, which to me means the quality of the league is probably higher. Just because if you're importing all these players, you would hope that they're better than the American player. But yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think one way we can solve that is something that I've always thought, something that Kevin touched on earlier, is if we had 40 teams in MLS and we had an MLS 1 and an MLS 2, it would help to really just kind of bridge that gap, and I think that would be huge. And we could still have USL, and maybe eventually have USL go to MLS 2. USL Championship and USL League One, maybe Championship goes to MLS 2. That's something far down the road, but I think something immediate that we could do that could satisfy the pro rel kind of argument and also keep MLS owners relatively happy is just make MLS 1, MLS 2. You could have everything on all the same platforms. You could watch all the games. It'd be a lot of intrigue. You could change the rules even for MLS 2 if you wanted, in terms of maybe you can't have as many foreigners. Maybe you have to have like lower salaries. I don't know. We can discuss that at a later date. But there's so many markets that want to join MLS. So why not just have them join in at MLS too and go from there? Make them
I think
earn
you
their
may see
way.
that get there, but I think a lot depends on the financial component. I think if the quality starts to suffer in the league and it goes down, people aren't watching, people aren't going to the games when we're able to go to the games and all that kind of thing. I think then, if the ratings becomes, they're not that high, but if that becomes a major component, major issue in terms of, well, if we had a better product, we could get a better TV deal, bring in a lot more revenue. I think those kind of external things that Kevin touched on, throughout earlier on in our conversation, when Alexi Lawless build a better mousetrap, I think those are the kinds of things that factor in. And when I think it becomes a reality that, there's so much money, many millions of dollars, a lot of money at stake, to do promotion relegation, then I think that's when, and I think it'll come sooner rather than later. But one of the interesting things there that I didn't see anywhere else was Kevin talking about the opportunity to go to Genk, which
Oh yeah.
We are the Elite Podcast, and we expect our listeners to be elite, sophisticated soccer fans, and to know what the opportunity to play at a club like Genk would be. But perhaps for some people, they don't realize that it actually, especially at that time, was and still is a very good opportunity for an American player. Definitely a solid European club to go to.
Absolutely. I think that was a wild story in terms of like, no, I don't know if anybody knows that. Besides him and MLS, because they brought him back.
And his teammates from California.
Yeah, but he does have an interesting perspective, like in terms of being comfortable. And like he didn't want to live in, what did he say? Was it Turkey? Like if he said some big Turkish comes in, Galatasaray, did he say? I don't forget what club he mentioned. No, I know Genk, but I'm saying he gave as an example. He's like, I don't want to go live there. Yeah. So that's an interesting point, and it's definitely something that, as someone who's played internationally, it is definitely a major factor. I enjoyed that part of it. I like the whole traveling and doing all that, but I've never lived in LA though, so maybe if I lived in LA, I would never want to leave. So
that is true. You're from wherever you are in the parts unknown, upstate New York.
Yeah, it's not upstate, but we'll get into that later.
That's another debate for another day. But one of the things I remember thinking years ago, at the time, when Stoke City was doing fairly well in the Premier League, and Jeff Cameron moved from Houston, to Dynamo to Stoke City, and I had just come back from I had just passed by Stoke when I was over there, and I remember thinking, I know it's the EPL, but he's leaving Houston to go to Stoke. There's not a lot to do in Stoke. I mean, it's close to Manchester, but I know it's EPL.
I've been to Stoke, and we actually played a game against Stoke City's. It was basically their guys who just weren't playing at the time, but it was a lot of first team guys, and it was not a great place to live. Like, we're just driving through it. It was farm country. So that'd be tough, but it is. I do think.
I know
I think I'm more on the side of you go do it. You go see, and if you don't like it, and if it's not good for you, then you come back. That's kind of where I sit on it, because I think playing abroad and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations really tests you as a person, and then therefore it also tests you as a player. But I mean, each individual has to make their own decisions, and Kevin seems very happy with his decisions, and he's had an excellent career. So he doesn't have any regrets. But for me, if I were given advice, I would say go to Stoke, or go to Genk, or just go see what it's like, and if you hate it, come back and put yourself in those situations to be uncomfortable. I think that's where the greatest development happens for most people. I do think some people develop the best when there's no competition for their place in the team. Like, they're clearly the best striker, best goalkeeper, whatever, and there's no competition, and they're internally motivated. So they still work hard. They still put in that, like those hours and in training, and they work, but they don't feel that pressure from behind. So the only pressure they face is from the other teams that they're playing. And I do think there are a lot of players that develop better that way. I think the majority need to be pushed by someone behind them or by an uncomfortable situation, but it's case by case. So you have to, like, if you're a youth player, if you're a young player that has that opportunity, you just gotta figure it out for yourself. Kind of look within yourself, and it's not an easy decision though, for sure.
No, I think for me, I have a lot of respect. As a fan, I would love to have seen Kevin at the time. I would love to have seen Kevin go to Genk, and had an opportunity to play in Europe and see how well he would have done. But I have a lot of respect for Kevin, for Jordan Morris, for Landon Donovan at the time, for the idea that MLS is a viable option. I have respect for them staying in the league because it's just something they wanted to do, quality of life, and they wanted to stay in America, stay in these places. Southern California seems to have a lot of appeal, and San Jose in Donovan's case at the time. But I have a lot of respect for the guys who want to stay in the league and play in the league. And I think it's great that we have a league like MLS for guys to be able to play at a very high level.
Absolutely. MLS is huge. Like to think that 30 years ago, we had no league. That's crazy. When I was born, there was no league, which is crazy to me. And there was no MLS, there was no USL Championship, there's no USL League One. So where we are today is miles ahead. But yeah, great conversation, Dave. Really interesting stuff. Do you have anything else to add to this before we sign off?
Yeah, I think, just really quick, I think we had a great week, as far as getting out the podcast with Sophia Huerta, with Paul Bravo.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of great feedback. I don't know if you got any feedback on those shows.
Yeah. People were really interested in Paul's stories and Sophia as well, with her national team experiences. It was good guests for us to get, and they're watching on YouTube. As soon as we went live on YouTube, the viewers are tuning in. Maybe not your generation, but the younger generation are tuning in. So glad we got on YouTube.
Well, we have Paul Bravo and Kevin Hartman for my generation. But yeah, we Sophia's more yours. But for everybody listening, thanks to everybody for listening, making us. We are the Elite Soccer Podcast, but for all the folks following us now, we hit it big. Now we're on the charts in the United States for soccer podcasts on Apple Podcasts. So I don't know if that exactly means anything or not, but it's definitely exciting and fun to see. Just if nothing else, it's more for banter. But I do want to see us become number one in Luxembourg. That's my goal. And also, great, not only for the guests that we've had. Now we had Kevin Hartman today, and then we, without revealing too much, we do have some really cool guests coming up. We'll let, once things are confirmed and the episodes are recorded, we'll do little teasers and plugs and things like that. I can say, I think with a lot of confidence, that at some point in the near future, Shamit Chom will be coming on the show, since I saw him reply to your message during the Kevin Hartman conversation, and that he's saying that he hasn't been asked. So we've officially asked Shamit Chom from Montreal Impact to come on the show. We're doing it live, well, not live, but recorded. And so Shamit, you're invited, and you're expected to be on the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, the Elite Soccer Podcast, all soccer podcasting and podcasting in general.
Of course, you got all your catchphrases. We get them in every episode. I don't know if anybody listens, but who knows?
Of course they listen. Oh, and also, if you don't mind, I did want to get a plug out for the Footwork Podcast. Your friends Dylan and Sean. Jake, you were on the show, right? How was your experience being on the show?
It was a really fun episode. We talked a lot. If you want, you can go check them out. They started maybe 3 months ahead of us, so they have about 25, 26 episodes out. They do a mixture between guest episodes and then just Dylan and Sean, who are the two co-hosts. They go into a lot of different topics. So yeah, they're a great podcast. Check them out. do you want to? I'll do our sponsorships as well for this.
Before, just real quick with the footwork podcast. Also, the episode that you did with them, I think, was sort of like a bit of like a pilot episode for our show because you hit on a lot of the conversation. It's a fun listen for, I think, anybody listening to our podcast, go and listen to that episode of theirs and maybe check out some of the other ones where you talk about some of our experiences and things and also moments in your career. But I really enjoyed it. I tried to give a shout out this week to the episode with Kim DeJazar. I'm not sure how.
Caesar, I think.
Yeah. And Long Island native fellow Long Islander like myself. And she when I don't want to give away too much, just listen to the episode, but the part that I really enjoyed the most was her experiences with PSV Eindhoven when she played over there. There's some really cool stories with a certain famous former professional Dutch player in there that just really funny more than anything. And Kim actually, funnily enough, was also, I remember back in the day when she was playing with Long Island Rough Riders, and I worked out at Stony Brook in the hospital here in Long Island, and Kim actually was one of the Rough Rider players that I had arranged with the Rough Riders to come out and visit the kids over there when the sick children, are pediatric patients over at Stony Brook. Kim was a young Rough Rider at the time, and I remember looking back through the pictures, a few years ago, and then with the time when she was playing and realizing that she was actually one of the players that came. So it was pretty funny.
That's really cool. Yeah, if you want to check out that episode 20 with me, I think we're going to do a similar episode on our podcast as well. Not to spoil anything. We got to get into the full story of both my career and then how you fit into that and all that good stuff. We should definitely do that one week.
We have to aristocratize your episode there. Aristocratize, excuse me.
Aristocrats. Okay, we'll do that. Yes. Thank you to we have our first sponsors this week. How great is that, huh?
Sponsorship is amazing.
It's important, yes. You're our first sponsor.
It's the charting, in the United States is what really clinched the deal.
Yeah, we're on the up. Very lucrative sponsorship deals, as I'm sure you all expect. But this T-shirt, Underdog New York, they're friends of mine from the New York area. They just started a clothing line recently. Go check them out on Instagram. They have a website. Really comfortable clothes. They got long sleeves, T-shirts, regular T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, etc., etc. Check them out. Great brand, comfortable clothes. And Dave, you have a sponsor as well for us.
Yes, we have Macron, Connecticut, Macron store. So it's MACRON store, STORECT for Connecticut.com. I believe they are the official Macron suppliers from the United States. And Macron has been very good to me in particular, and they are a sponsor now. So it's nice to have some sponsors on the show. And when you give them a call, if you mention my name, you get absolutely no discount.
Dave Zero.
If you mention Jake Keegan, you get 0.99% off your order.
Hey, it's better than nothing.
If you call, you ask for Scar brother. Nick Scar is the man behind that Macron store, and maybe we'll have them do a cameo one day during a wrap up or something. Run it.
Oh, awesome. Great episode this week, Dave. Thanks so much. We enjoyed it. Until next time, everyone. I'm the athlete.
I'm the advocate.
And we are the Aristocrats.